Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us to talk about the 5 dimensions of wellness. So we are the Colorado Spirit team. We are a grant-funded team helped or designed to help with COVID. We will exist through December 27th of 2021. And so if you're watching this after that date, we're likely no longer available, but our host organization, Jefferson Center, is available and happy to help folks that may need support within the community. We will provide more contact information for them at the end of our presentation. And so to join us today, we're talking about wellness. So what is wellness? Merriam-Webster, this is their definition of the quality or state of being in good health, especially as an actively sought goal. And we really liked this definition for that actively sought goal part. We felt that that really spoke to why wellness is important. We hear the term self-care thrown around a lot, and we kind of understand that as something that we're supposed to do, but it can sometimes feel like an extra task or an extra chore, and not as something that we do really because we want to or to take care of ourselves, but because it feels like something we should do. And so our hope in this presentation is kind of to change that framework a little bit and to see this as a goal that we have of a way to take care of ourselves and to support ourselves so that when life gets harder or more stress is given to us, we are able to respond and handle it a little bit more healthily and with more resilience.
We wanted to talk about values as well. And this poem by Shel Silverstein called Falling Up, I think is a good intro into this conversation. The voice. There's a voice inside of you that whispers all day long. I feel like this is right for me. I know that this is wrong. No teacher, preacher, parent, friend, or wise man can decide what's right for you. Just listen to the voice that speaks inside. So values are the sum of our preferences and priorities, and preferences on what we'd like to have or what we'd like to include in our lives. Priorities are how important each preference is in relation to each other. That's prioritization rather. And it's easy to confuse values with rules. There are many ways to live by a value and a limited way to live by rules. And it may not always be a complete goal, but can always strive to live according to your own values in the sense that you can have rules and values coincide, which will help you live and strive according to what feels right inside of you. Next slide.
Right, so this is the 5 dimensions of wellness. And so we included values in the center there. As Muneer was talking about, these are really the core of a lot of our morals, of what our drives. And so keeping those at the center of our wellness can help us to find more meaningful ways to take care of ourselves. We split wellness up into these 5 different dimensions: spiritual, physical, social, intellectual, and emotional. We're going to go through each of the definitions and give you some examples of them, but before we do that, we wanted to talk about how all of these interplay with each other, right? So my spiritual wellness does not stand solely by itself. It's impacted by all of the other 4 areas, both for negatively and positively. So if I do something such as I go with a group of friends and we pick up trash around one of our local hiking trails, this is something that I can do that helps my spiritual wellness because it helps get me outside into nature. It helps me give back to my community, take care of those around me. And it's like helping my social wellness as well because I'm doing this with friends and being able to laugh and enjoy that social interaction while doing this. So these are things that start getting creative with ways to help these different areas. It doesn't have to be that one action solely helps one area. Um, they can double dip as much as possible. So spiritual wellness is having a set of values, principles, morals, and beliefs that provide a sense of purpose and meaning to life, and then using those principles to guide your actions. So this can be things as just feeling connected to something larger than yourself. Um, for a lot of folks, spirituality can be related to a religion, but that does not necessarily mean, or that's not how we decided to define this. It can be something that you connect through a deity, through nature, through ancestors or music. It is really just something that connects you to something larger than yourself. For example, I really find my spiritual wellness when I'm out in nature or when I'm connecting to um, humanity as a whole. So here are some tips for spiritual wellness. We'll go over a few, but feel free to pause the screen as we come to these tip slides. If you want to write them down, read them all. We worked hard to cultivate these lists, so we hope they are useful for folks. But for spiritual wellness, it can be really wonderful to have this powerful why, that this can really help you move forward. It gives you um, that kind of motivation to push forward. You can also kind of take stock of any undesired coping patterns that you may have. This can help tip you off to when you're avoiding something. And then if you are trying to change a habit, schedule that habit so that it's a intentional time period that you are going to be doing this and working on it rather than just trying to do it when you remember to.
In terms of physical wellness involves making choices to fulfill our bodies in a way that is meaningful for us. And this includes a balance of activities that align with our values in regard to our own physical health. So for example, if I really value adventure for my physical wellness, maybe that means I'm finding new hikes or trying to discover new places. Maybe I value being the best in something, and this can relate to my physical wellness as well. Maybe I value being the best physically and trying to always push myself to do better than I was before physically, whatever that means for me, whatever that kind of activity looks like for me. In terms of tips for physical wellness, trying to maintain regular bedtimes and wake times. So with that, trying to limit blue screen time or screen time to at least an hour before bed, and not really crossing those boundaries when it comes to how we use our bed for rest and sleep versus for work. So sometimes it's really easy. I have done it myself where I've rolled out of bed, or not even rolled out of bed, but I've checked my work phone in the morning in bed. And that can impact my physical wellness if that becomes a habit, because now my sleeping space is turning into my working space. So that's one thing to think about. Another thing you could think about is letting go of what others have said you should do, especially in terms of physical wellness. In our society, in our culture, we have specifically in our particular culture here in the US, we have pharmaceutical companies that advertise freely on TV and on other platforms. And we have a whole huge industry when it comes to physical wellness and that aspect of health. And so you might hear a lot of messaging, oh, you ought to do this, you ought to do that, like drinking 8 glasses of water a day or whatever it is. And if that doesn't really work for you, then maybe it's time to let go of what are some of those things you've heard others say that you should do, or if you've heard messaging on what you should do, and try to keep in touch with what it is you actually need, what you individually need for your physical wellness. One part of physical wellness, I think about like a typical example of going to the gym, for example, is where's my motivation there? Not I'm saying that you have to have a gym membership in order to be physically well. In fact, I'd say that any kind of movement, and replacing that word exercise with movement is good. But if we're talking about motivation for exercise or movement or to do something that'll help you be physically well, try doing it when you think of it instead of pushing it off. So if you have the opportunity and the moment to do something that you feel will help you get physically well, and you have the time right then and there, and that thought occurs to you, maybe you could just do it right then and there. And of course, along with sleeping, there's eating as well, right? So if we sleep and go to bed and wake up at regular times, it's also good for us to have regularly scheduled meals that we eat at the same time. And then, of course, the kinds of foods that we intake matter as well.
All right, so intellectual wellness is wellness immersing oneself cognitively in ways that stimulate our thoughts in order to foster growth, encourage mental engagement, and spark creativity. So, for example, if I really value growth, maybe my intellectual wellness is I'm trying to dive more into my passions and grow my skills in those areas. So, for example, I rock climb, and I feel like this example kind of works for physical and for spiritual and intellectual. So we're gonna just triple dip as much as possible. Um, so for when I go and rock climb, I have really tried to find this motivation for why I'm doing it. Um, I love it. It's a lot of fun, and sometimes it can feel like it's a great workout, but I can get lost in that where I feel like I'm doing this because this is what's going to make my body healthy. I'm burning calories and that's what I should do. And trying to separate that to find that why is really useful. But then also for intellectually, rock climbing is very much so um, a physical puzzle that my mind is trying to figure out how to make my body do. And so if I am trying to really tap into this intellectual wellness, I am trying to find new ways to solve a puzzle. I'm trying to find a way that I am not tall enough to be able to reach that hole that I want to get to with my hand. How do I move my body in a way that gets me there? And so finding these things that you can do, these hobbies that can fill all of these different wellness areas can be really useful. So some tips for intellectual wellness. Listening to a new podcast is a great way to discover new things, spark some curiosity. It's also a great place to practice some active listening skills. Um, Exploring different avenues for creativity and artistic expression. My mother really has always really loved the idea of being able to throw pottery and like try a class. And she was telling me about this and she was like, I feel like I should do it. And I was like, why not? You've got no kids at home now. You might as well try it. And she gave it a shot and she has been having the most fun. She doesn't know that any of her things are very good yet, but I told her that it's going to take time. But even then, you're still making something, and that's more than a lot of folks do end up doing. So, giving new things a shot is a great way to take care of your intellectual wellness. Um, I think hosting a non-serious debate night can also be a really great way to have that intellectual wellness and that social wellness. You're inviting friends over and you're having these debates about things that are not serious at all. We're trying to stay away from any sort of political discussion, but things such as like who framed Roger Rabbit? Which of your friends has the best pet? And what is the best trash reality TV show of all time? In my opinion, it's The Circle. I'm pretty sure that Muneer has a very different opinion than me, but that is something that we discuss all the time.
In terms of social wellness refers to relationships we've had and how we interact with others. This involves building healthy, nurturing, and supportive relationships, as well as fostering a genuine connection with those around you. So, for this dimension, if you really value community, maybe you're finding ways to serve and connect within your community. Maybe you're going to a local homeless shelter to volunteer, or maybe it's even an animal shelter. And maybe you're making up lunch bags with socks, or maybe other essential things to give folks experiencing homelessness. And that's one way, of course, to conceptualize social wellness. Or maybe it's collaboration. Maybe you're joining a team sport or a team project to go to work together to solve a common goal. Or maybe it is something more simple, such as being with friends and being with family and making space for those social interactions and having doing activities with them, um, fun activities or even serious activities. And the amount of talking or communication involved in those activities, it can be variable. There may be, I mean, going back to Megan's example of rock climbing, I think that it could also dip into the social realm for me personally, because as much as I might rock climb alone, I know that there's a different social value that I'm experiencing if I go rock climbing with Megan, for example, in which we might encourage each other to push ourselves a little further, or to look at the rock placements of our hands a little bit differently. And that can be a social activity. In terms of tips, it's important to be mindful of the commitments you make and if they're important to you. Um, if you can foster a social circle that's positive and healthy for you, that would be better. So who do you include in that circle, and who do you maybe not include in that circle? Um, Prioritizing caring for yourself over others. This may seem counterintuitive considering we're talking about social wellness, so we're kind of talking about others, but in order for us to be present fully in a social situation and show up in the way that we want, if we aren't taken care of in other realms, we might suffer socially in our interactions. We might um, present in a way that isn't necessarily who we think we are, or in a way that we believe aligns with our values. Creativity is always important, especially with communication. So you can work on your communication skills creatively, but also you can get creative on how you spend time with your friends. And if human contact isn't feasible for you right now, you can be sociable with a pet, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be with another human being if that's too difficult for you right now. Of course, there's volunteering, which I mentioned before. Um, Active listening, right? What is that anyway? Active listening, or sometimes it can be called to reflective listening, as well as when you try to confirm whatever it is the other person is saying to you, so that in your own words, so that they are in agreement and both of you are in agreement on what it is that's being discussed. And then giving yourself permission to just do things alone or with other people. So that goes back again to, maybe you can't be with somebody right now. So you just really give yourself permission to be like, I can't be with people right now. And that is actually my social wellness in action, is not necessarily being with people right now, but being away from people right now. And just as like a scheduling thing, and we talk about eating on time, sleeping on time, and so on and so forth, but you can also have a regular schedule with friends, like a regular play date. And if you're an adult listening, say, I don't know about play dates, but as adults, we still need to play, of course. But just having that already scheduled in, so it's part of your routine, so it's one less thing that you have to think about. That social wellness already built into your life as a default.
Yeah, I have regularly scheduled phone calls with friends, and it is a great way to like take care of my social wellness while still being able to distance the best that we can. So emotional wellness is the process of recognizing, understanding, and accepting our emotions. It involves the ability to remain in the present moment and effectively handle change and challenges in life. So in this area, if you value family, maybe setting some boundaries about around who is in that family circle, like Muneer was speaking to, like those circles of closeness. Like maybe you have a family circle, and then you have a close friend circle, and then you have an acquaintances circle, and but being able to set firm boundaries for who has access to those different circles, and what level of emotional reserve each of those circles gets from you. If you value relaxation, maybe you're taking some time to relax and connect back to yourself so that you can recharge your emotional wellness before going and supporting others. So, some tips for this for emotional wellness: take time for self reflection. If you are experiencing an emotion, it's so useful to be able to sit in that emotion and give it a name, be able to really describe it and understand it. Um, and if you're having trouble doing this, look up an emotion wheel. If you Google it, there will be a fairly comprehensive one that comes through, and it starts with a very broad word for an emotion like anger, happiness, sad, and then it starts to get more specific as it goes out. So you can determine which word feels the most applicable to what you're feeling. But once we have the language to discuss our emotions, we're better able to explain them and work with them if we're talking to others, if we're explaining to somebody else how we felt or why we felt that way. If we have the words to explain it, it makes it much easier for them to understand us. Um, Starting or ending your day with breathing or grounding exercises or meditation. This can be a great way, a great place to like reflect on emotions and practice acceptance of those emotions. Um, to have some curiosity and kindness towards yourself for any new emotions you felt in the day. Asking if my friend were feeling this way, how would I respond to them is a great place to start as well. A lot of times we've all heard this golden rule of like treat others the way you want to be treated. But I think sometimes we forget that we don't treat ourselves how we would want others to treat us. And so trying to start to flip that script a little bit and think about how to better treat ourselves can be a great way to take care of our emotional wellness as well.
So we just wanted to say thank you for coming here today. But before we did that, we wanted to close out just by showing the wheels again and how it values are really in the center of those dimensions. And the reason values are sort of underpinning these values is because when we look at each dimension, spiritual, physical, social, intellectual, emotional, and we think individually about each dimension of wellness, and we might be able to assess, if we had like a scale or something like that, or a bullseye or whatever, we might be able to say, I'm kind of here, right spot on when it comes to my spiritual wellness, or I'm kind of far away from it in terms of what my values are. And so when we go through each dimension and we do that assessment, we can start to understand whether or not we're living by our values. And if we have certain values or certain realms, rather, of dimensions of wellness where we are living pretty far from our values, it might be worth examining that. Why am I so far physically? Why do I feel so far from my values socially? And in that discussion you have with yourself, you may decide to make some changes. You may decide to do some things differently, or you may decide that this is exactly where you need to be right now in terms of your values in
Mhm.
realms of wellness. But it's something to think about, something to explore. So again, thank you. If you need any kind of crisis assistance, we have that number up there for the 24/7 crisis line. And then here at Jefferson Center, we have a wonderful navigation team that is able to help folks um, with a multitude of things. And so their email is up there, navigation@jcmh.org. Um, and then also our email and JCMH's general website is also there.